At this year's UN Climate Action Summit, young Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg made a stunning rebuke at world leaders, condemning them for betraying young people and failing to take tangible action to face climate change. Joining us today is Dr. Frank Rijsberman, the Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute, an intergovernmental organisation based here in Seoul that promotes green growth and environmental sustainability. He attended this year's UN summit, and he's here with us to tell us more about what he witnessed and to tell us about the GGGI as well. Welcome to the show, Dr. Rijsberman.
Thank you.
So let's start with that UN Climate Action Summit, as I mentioned. Greta Thunberg, she made quite an impression, didn't she?
Indeed. I think hers were the most powerful words I heard. I was in the room with her there, and, I certainly felt personally addressed. The way she has been able to mobilize, young people around the world to step up is incredibly impressive. And I do think that her words were heard. Not everybody, of course, stepped up to the microphone straight away and said, we will now do this and that. And we saw quite a bit of negative reaction in the news. But I was in a lot of events where there was real leadership as well.
Right. As you said, there was various reactions that came from it, but Greta was making an impassioned plea. And the overall aim of the event, the summit, was to try to inspire world leaders to take action against climate change. Do you think they're listening?
Yes, of course, not all of them. I mean, I was in quite a few events with people like the Danish Prime Minister, who was elected recently and who has made one of the most ambitious commitments. The country is one that has passed a climate law to become net zero carbon emissions by 2050. But in addition to that, they have now committed to reduce their emissions by 70% by 2030. That's very ambitious. And the Prime Minister was there, the Energy Minister was there, they were all backing up that pledge. Together with business, by the way, the Danish pension funds and others, you can see that in countries like Denmark, and there were, by the way, more than 70 countries who likewise committed to net zero by 2050, there is real leadership.
I wanted to ask you about that target, actually. You said it is ambitious. Is it realistic? Can countries really do this?
Well, the Danish Prime Minister addressed that as well. She said, honestly, I don't exactly know how we will do this. But that is not necessarily a weak point. When President Kennedy said we will put a man on the moon in 10 years from now, he didn't know how to do that. He just put a vision out there. He put a clear target out there. In fact, the Danish Prime Minister said, if I knew exactly how to get there, then our target would not be ambitious enough. Then it should be even more ambitious, because we do have to make an effort to invent new things, come up with new ingenuity and push. Because yes, it is a very difficult challenge. I think most of us there were convinced that there is a climate crisis and that we should do absolutely everything we can to make that change.
Do you think the atmosphere has changed over this issue as well over the last few years? Are more and more people taking this issue seriously and making efforts to make changes going forward?
Of course, you know that there are some countries where it seems almost to go in the opposite direction, right? The US, Australia, Brazil, that is not helping. Their presidents are not stepping up. But many other countries are, not just Denmark, but 70 plus others. I mean, countries that are taking really serious commitments, doubling their funding to the Green Climate Fund here in Korea. And then there are a number of countries in the middle, like Korea, where currently the government has committed to increase renewable energy to 20%. And others are saying, really, is that enough? Can you not be more ambitious? So that is Korea, that is also Indonesia. There are a number of countries where we're hoping that between now and the end of next year, when we all go to the COP in Glasgow, where countries have to recommit to what they will do under the Paris Agreement, that they will step up and do more. So in a way, in New York, it was a milestone to that. And I saw a lot of leadership, a lot of examples, a lot of people making commitments. Not enough yet. So we have a lot of work to do between now and the end of next year to convince more of these world leaders to really step up.
Would you say that's the biggest barrier, getting everyone on board with this message?
Yes, because not everybody realizes that actually this is also in their own best interest. It's not just good for the planet, it's also good for business. Renewable energy has become commercially attractive. There are more jobs, more green jobs in building windmills than have been lost in coal mining or coal processing in countries like the UK. So yes, we helped Indonesia do a study on low carbon development. Indonesia is one of those countries not yet convinced. But in that study it showed that if the country wants to keep growing longer term, this green transition is also absolutely the best thing to do for their economy and for the jobs, not just for air pollution and climate change, but also if you want to have, have your children enjoy the same wealth we do.
You've mentioned there a little bit of what your organization does, the Global Green Growth Institute.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, we're actually not really an institute, but an intergovernmental organization. That means that countries sign up to become our members by ratifying a treaty, all very formal words. We've been set up by Korea and a number of other countries in 2012. We now have 33 member countries and another 20 that are in the process of joining. And what we do is we help those governments come up with plans, such as for the Paris Agreement, green growth plans, and then to come up with tangible projects that can help implement that and help find the money for that, green and climate finance, for instance, from the Green Climate Fund here in Korea. So we have staff sitting not only in Seoul, where our headquarters is, but in 33 other countries where they sit inside ministries of finance, ministries of planning, to help come up with those policies and then with projects. And we help mobilize not that much yet compared to the need, but about $1 billion to fund green and climate projects in our member countries. So yes, what we are doing is making a difference towards that goal that we've been discussing here.
And as you said, it is a very international, intergovernmental, cooperative kind of network. Yeah. Perhaps we see that most here recently, where President Moon Jae-in, he met with the Danish Prime Minister on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, and they announced that a Danish-led climate summit called the P4G will be held in Seoul next year. And they were also said to have agreed to further cooperate between the P4G initiative and your organization, the GGGI. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, we were very excited by that. We had an event where the Danish Prime Minister and President Moon and our president of GGGI, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, all made these announcements. And this is an effort from Denmark to partner for green growth and the global goals. The first summit was in Denmark last year, and now the next summit will be in Seoul in June next year to stimulate countries to do something, to do more about climate change and to help with this green transition. So we are very pleased that the President made that commitment, that he will invite other heads of state of the P4G countries, as we call them, of the GGGI member countries as well, to come to Seoul, come with their commitments, share best practices with each other, and yes, encourage them to implement those kind of policies back home. It's also the 10-year anniversary of GGGI, so we will be part of that summit with that celebration as well.
Right, perfect timing. That's next year, though. This year, you're also holding something called the Global Green Growth Week 2019. That's being held in October 21st to 25th in Seoul. So you're very busy organisation. So what can you tell us more about that as well?
Almost the rehearsal for that summit next year. It's both in COEX. So this is our annual meeting where all our countries come together. And this year it's together with an international renewable energy conference that the Korean government is also hosting. So it's a whole week where we talk about sharing knowledge around green growth. The Burkina Faso Prime Minister will come, one of our new members. We know that the Vice President of Ecuador, who will join as a country, will come. And generally speaking, we will use it as a platform again to boost this transition to a green economy that we think is absolutely vital.
I hear the theme for this year is renewable energy is now I hear the theme for this year is unlocking renewable energy potential. I saw in one of your recent interviews that you said renewable energy is now a commercially attractive investment opportunity. Can you elaborate more on this as well?
Yes, not that long ago people say, okay, maybe clean energy is better, but they didn't realize that actually it's now the cheapest form of energy, right? In 2017, the Indian government, they thought they were going to build a lot more coal-fired power plants, but then they discovered through an auction that the cheapest form that they could invest in was solar energy. So all those plans for building coal-fired power plants went straight out of the window. In Vietnam this year, same thing. They had a goal to have solar energy by 2025, 4.5 gigawatt. They reached it early by the middle of this year. And there are still quite a few countries that haven't quite realized that actually it's in their own best interest. If you want to have blue skies, as they say in China, if you want to get rid of fine dust, we'll have to have clean forms of energy. And then once you have that clean energy, you want electric buses rather than the diesel buses and so on. In our immediate interest for our health, for yours and mine, so we can stop wearing those masks, so our kids can play outside, and so that the children of our children have a future as well with climate change. So it is not only a good thing to do for the planet, it's also commercially attractive. So in New York, we saw quite a few people that we will again see here in Seoul that are investing in renewable energy because it makes good sense. Danish pension funds, for instance, that have already invested $15 billion of their money, that, yes, their members also want to have a good pension, so they don't take a lot of risks. They just think that this is a great way to get a good return on their money, and they committed in New York to invest an extra $50 billion, just little Denmark, in renewable energy in the next 10 years. So there we see how the private sector is investing in this green transition just because it makes good economic sense.
We're running out of time, but I want to ask you about the future goals for the organisation. You talked about the event coming up, the event next year, but in the long term, what are the future goals for the GGGI? And are there any last words you'd like to say to our listeners? Because you work on an intergovernmental level, but it starts from the personal level as well, and the individual level as well.
Yep. So if we think of Greta Thunberg, probably the most important thing that she does is she wakes up a whole generation, all these other young people that realize that it's in their hands. Yes, they should influence their leaders, they should influence governments. We work on that to make sure that those governments step up for the Paris agreements. We support them in learning from each other. But all of us can contribute by being more mindful in using public transport rather than your car, in so many actions you can take, making sure that you don't pollute with one-use plastics. Many things we can all do to make sure that we work on a green and healthy economy going forward. So 2030 is a goal we share in our own vision, together with achieving the so-called Paris Agreement goals and the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations.
Sure, tackling climate change is a mission we all need to contribute to, but hopefully people like Greta and groups such as the GGGI, more people, especially world leaders, can be inspired to do more. We've been speaking to Dr. Frank Rijsberman, the Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute. Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for having me.